Hi, my name is Steve.
Hi, my name is Geoff Keighley, the host and producer of the Game Awards.
That's where I recognized you from. I knew it was somewhere. I know that guy. I can't figure out from where.
Good to see you, Steve. Thanks for inviting me on.
I appreciate you taking the time to come hang out with our show. Obviously, you're in the middle of your 95 different shows and the millions of people who are demanding your attention, so we definitely appreciate you coming on here.
Well, I appreciate all that you've done for the gaming community, and we were honored to have you be one of our global gaming citizens a couple years ago at Game Awards. So, I'm always happy to make the time.
I really do appreciate that. I can't wait for the 7 other awards I'm going to win this year. Spoilers. So we're all gathered here to hear all about Geoff. So we all know about the Game Awards and Gamescom and now the Summerfest, and we know all about that stuff. But really, I don't know that people know Geoff as much as they should. And I know Geoff because you and I have gotten to actually sit down and talk, not as much as we might like, but for a couple of minutes here and there. And you're actually a pretty profound dude, so I kind of want to tap into that.
All right. Well, I'm no questions are off limits. Let's do it.
All right. Where did you hide the bodies? No. So, question number 1. Let's start out kind of easy. Let's talk about where you were born. Where did you grow up?
Yeah, I was born in Markham, Ontario, Canada, which is a suburb of Toronto. Born there and grew up really all my young years in Canada until I was 18 years old when I came down to the United States for college. But yeah, I grew up in Canada. I'm Canadian and started playing games up in Canada. That's where it all began.
Were you always somebody who started out in the life of gaming and just have been day one gamer?
Yeah, my gaming history, it started with my mother was always very into sort of computers, and she did a lot of accounting for my dad's company. Mm-hmm. And I remember as a kid, we had a lot of just computers in the house, and I had a home office where they would work on. So she had an IBM PC computer, the original sort of PC. And I remember sometimes when she wasn't using her accounting software as a kid, I would get to use the computer, and there were sort of some very early reading basically games and things like that I got to play, or even a game called Turtle Tracks, which was like this little cursor that you got to tell how to move around. People may remember it. So I got to kind of experiment with that stuff when I was a very young kid, and then my parents actually had me take computer lessons when I was a kid. I don't know, I was probably 5-6 years old. And I went to meet with a lady that learned how to type and also learned about a computer. So yeah, very early on, I sort of learned about computers. They were in my life as a young kid. And then some of my earliest memories of games are playing games on my kind of family computer in the living room with my brother on this IBM PC and things like some of the early games I remember. Probably there were sort of games in the mid 80s. It was like California Games, Summer Games, Willow Game from Film games.
Wow.
A lot of the early adventure games. I really loved the Sierra Online adventures like King's Quest, Space Quest, Leisure Suit Larry even. I wasn't supposed to be playing it at the time. And LucasArts adventure games like Monkey Island and things like that. And those were the things that I played as a kid. I loved, and they were text-based adventure games. There was a lot of reading in them. It was that's how I did my reading, really, was in these immersive game worlds, and I would play them, and I'd get stuck, and I'd have to figure out what the hint is about how to sort of solve the puzzle and things like that. So that was really my early exposure to games was when I was a kid, and this was when I was 7, 8, 9 years old. I was playing all these video games. So yeah, it was kind of been with me since the start of my life in a lot of ways.
I'm kind of impressed that you managed to remember that many titles. I pretty much remembered Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the time before Ooze, where you get caught in this stupid dam and you can never get those bombs in time. That's the only thing I remember from my childhood.
Yeah, and I remember I would go play arcade games a little bit too. I go play, Double Dragon and the Pizza Parlor and arcade games, and even the TMNT game was an awesome arcade game back in the day. So I remember a little bit of that. We had consoles and stuff as well that we got to play. I mean, I remember even though Famicom, we imported it, I think, from Japan or something. We got to play Mario 2, I think, that only came out there or something. And there was a lot of, we had a Sega Master System. I had a lot of gaming devices, and my parents were, to their credit, were always very supportive of my kind of gaming hobby and interests. And I got back in the day, there was special sound cards you would get for PCs. So I got a Roland MT32 sound card, which was a special sound card you got to have even better kind of MIDI audio on your adventure games. And I got one of those.
I like how you just said that in the same way somebody who bragged about it back then. I got the rolling card. Yeah.
Exactly. That was the big thing. And then, 3D accelerators and all that. But yeah, so my parents were very supportive of my kind of hobby playing video games. And it really was just the fun of playing video games. I enjoyed them. And then that ultimately kind of led into my career. I don't skip ahead too far, but yeah, that led into my career in gaming because I got to actually beta test some of those video games.
Yeah, let's definitely not jump all the way to the all-powerful Keighley. Let's stay back in the past for a minute. Let's talk about that family structure. How were your parents and your brother and all that growing up? Was it a cool family environment where gaming was just part of your blood?
Yeah, it was. My parents are in the entertainment movie industry and IMAX is sort of what my parents both have worked on really since the beginning. Dad directed a lot of the early IMAX films and helped produce them. So I was kind of around entertainment, kind of immersive entertainment in the film world. But yeah, computers were just part of my life from when I was young. I loved playing games. It was a family thing. I have a younger brother and a younger sister. And my younger brother, who's 3 years younger than me, we would play games a lot together. My younger sister was much more into books. And in her room, she would just read. That's what she would do all the time. She'd sit there and read. And she's amazing, but she was just never really into video games at all. But my brother and I were the two that would play a lot of games together. And I just had a lot of fun playing games. And even, at school, I would have friends that would play games. And we would, trade floppy disks of games. Like that. And that was sort of, part of the culture. When I always say to people growing up in Canada, games were just top of mind with a lot of people. And we would, we'd call into BBSs when we were kids and stuff like that. And that was just sort of part of the culture, which I was really lucky. And there was a software store near me called A+ Software. And I would go there when King's Quest, let me go get, the box with the 38 floppy disks you had to install or something of the game and things like that. So yeah, it was a very, my family's awesome, and they were, incredibly supportive of all the things I was doing. And that was just naturally what I liked to do as a kid was sort of play video games and I would be on the computer. And yeah, I was just always computer literate. And I credit my mother in particular for sort of always being sort of very tech forward. And even to this day, she'll buy new gadgets and, buy some crazy new projector they just bought for movies, and they're just always into kind of technology and stuff like that.
Awesome.
So I got a lot of that from my parents. I think my sort of early interest in video games. Not that they ever played video games, right? I've never played a video game with my parents, actually. So it wasn't like we all sat around and, played Mario Kart or something like that, but they were very supportive.
It sounds like technology helped keep you connected to your parents and gaming helped keep you connected to your brother. Did you find that was one of the things that really helped you guys bond as, brothers?
Yeah. We were, that's what we would do. Is sort of play games together. And, he would have his computer. And we originally had one computer in the family room where we would sort of gather and play games there. And then eventually we sort of ended up getting our own computers in our own bedrooms. And then we would sort of play games. And yeah, I have a lot of fond memories of us. Even the early days of multiplayer games, we would play those over our modems. And we'd call each other's computers, two phone lines. And I'd sort of call into his computer in some early games like Descent and Doom and Duke Nukem 3D and things like that. This was sort of in the 90s, I guess. We would have computers in our rooms, and then we would modem each other, and then we'd play Doom in 1993 or 1994 multiplayer with each other over modem. So the very early days of multiplayer, and that was kind of fun. Even though we had bedrooms in Toronto, my bedroom, and there was a bathroom between us and my brother's room. We'd have a bathroom that we'd sort of share, and we'd have our separate bedrooms. And yeah, we would sort of call each other and play video games together. So that was definitely fun. And that was what I did. And then obviously it expanded into playing with friends and then playing over the internet. But this was back in the day where you had to, you remember, 1-to-1 connect modem with someone for the early days of multiplayer. So yeah, it was definitely a bonding experience for us when we were younger.
Did you end up having a lot of friends growing up in high school that were also into tech?
Yeah, I wouldn't say. I had friends. They were, yes, I think my friends tended to be in sort of the BBS world was kind of big back when I was a kid. So we would have we'd call in the BBSs together and we would share sort of floppy disks and stuff like that. These were kind of friends in kind of school. And yeah, that was exactly. I didn't have an exorbitant number of friends. I largely kept to myself. When I was a kid, I'm allergic to dogs and cats. And one thing I always say is sort of formative for me was that when I was a kid, I would go over to other people's houses to sort of play sometimes, right, as you do as a kid. And oftentimes I would go to their house and I'd get sick because there'd be a dog or a cat there. And it was tough for me because as a kid, you go over. And again, you could take like Dimetap at the time and other things that would sort of prevent you from sort of getting stuffed up. And it wasn't like I was deathly ill, it was just like uncomfortable. And I always remember that when I was a kid, it's like I would probably go visit less people because of my allergy to pets. So it made me sort of, I think, a little bit more inward focused of sort of like staying at home and playing on computers and things like that, because it was sort of difficult. And people would come over in my house and play and we'd hang out. But that was definitely something that I think was formative in me, like not being as sort of social as I might have been otherwise, because I was always fearful of sort of like going to get sick when I visited other people. And even now, like I'm still allergic somewhat, but I've, as you get older, it's like you manage it and that's fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just remember as a little kid, that was sort of like my first sort of the frustration, right? And again, lots of people have much bigger frustrations in their life, but I think it was something that was sort of formative to me in terms of probably being a little bit more insular and isolating and sort of when I was a kid.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you think that's sort of what gave you your insight to understanding the social isolation thing that disabled people are facing? Like you kind of already had a taste of it.
I mean, I'm sure that helped. I always try and be sort of empathetic to everyone, right? And you just, you never know what someone's going through, right? And I think I'm always mindful of that. And I give my parents credit for that, growing up in a house where we always were trying to think of other people. But yes, I agree that probably some of that made me, sort of always have perspective on things, right? And I think you always in life, you need things to sort of draw against to sort of give you reference points, right? And I, that's certainly something that I look at of like, yeah, that feeling of sort of, that sort of social isolation. I don't think at the time I equated to that, but yeah, maybe it did sort of help me, empathize sort of with other people's situations. And again, like I say like an allergy to a pet is, in the grand scheme of things, is certainly not a disability by any means, right? I mean, it's sort of like it's an allergy. But I think that, yeah, it did cause me. It did change my behavior, I think, as a kid. And I don't, you never know sort of the cart before the horse. If it was sort of like I was going to be sort of, a little more isolating than I was anyways. And the allergy was sort of an excuse for it, or I don't know. But it was, and again, it wasn't a thing where I wouldn't leave my house or something like that. But it was just something that I remember as a kid that it definitely informed me to sort of stay at home and like connect with people over the internet, right? And like I was, had like CompuServe and Prodigy and AOL and BBSs. That was something that was a way for me to kind of communicate with people in a little bit of I guess a safer sort of environment in a way. So yeah, I think it's a good point though.
Absolutely. When we're talking about things that make you take a different path in life, I think it's those formative years that maybe matter the most when you're learning to be empathetic, to be a kind person, to be somebody who thinks about others and can put yourself in those situations. And I think a lot of us didn't really get that until the recent pandemic, where we really started understanding what social isolation is. Even if you didn't know the name of it, you certainly felt a little more alone than you did the year before anyway around it. It's interesting to hear that you kind of had an early taste of that in some ways with the allergies. Of course, not comparing an allergy to a pandemic, but having that same sort of, limiting factor. Did you find that video games and the culture ended up sort of being a good way of you fighting off early stage, loneliness and sort of staying connected to the world? Did you always find yourself more of a happy person?
Yeah, I've been lucky that I like being alone in a lot of ways. Yeah. And so, yeah, I've never been someone that luckily has had to, suffer with sort of depression or feeling unhappy. I generally am I'm very like content as just a natural sort of state of order. And I don't think I'm exuberantly happy or I'm sort of, very depressed or disappointed in life. And I always feel like that's a little bit of my own doing of sort of like I've very much been just sort of even keel about everything. And games, I'm also not the kind of person that ever sort of gets bored either. Like there's always like things on my mind, right? Of like things I want to do. And I thought games and the internet and just even the early days of the internet and BBSs, I just felt very empowered by the idea of sort of sitting somewhere at a terminal and being able to access all this information, right? And connect with people around the world. And that was very empowering for me when I was calling into like Software Creations BBS, which was very early bulletin board system where a lot of the early gaming companies like id and Epic, even Tim Sweeney and stuff, would upload his games to this BBS and we'd get to download them and play them, and we were sort of connecting through the world in that. So yeah, I think it gave me a sense of connection because you're right, we all sort of yearn for that in some ways, and I think it was exciting for me to be in the very early days of the internet. Like I remember when I launched my first website, I think 1996, And that was like the very early days of like the web. And I have those very crisp memories being a kid and having like a DSL modem installed at home in Toronto so I could, access some of the very early like websites and HTML 1.0 and things like that. And it's really just for the right place, right time. I was at the right age that I was able to sort of, experience that just as I was, I think, in high school was when that was sort of starting. So to answer your question, yeah, I think that absolutely helped me feel a sense of connection to people, which maybe made it less necessary for me to feel that sort of in real life, I guess.
It's interesting because a lot of people find it very difficult to maintain that copacetic level of contentness. People often chasing happiness, trying to always feel that high of being giddy and happy. I think we would be remiss not to explore that with you and sort of say, do you think happiness is something that you control, or do you think sometimes happiness controls you?
Yeah, look, I mean, the whole world of happiness is a fascinating topic for me, right? And there's a great book called Happy that a writer, Darren Brown, he's actually a magician, has written. It's an amazing book that talks a lot about sort of really based on Stoicism, that sort of philosophy, and that's something that I definitely am sort of stoic in my view of some of this stuff. And by that I mean that you're so grateful for what you have, and it really does feel to me like I've always felt that I'm privileged and lucky that I had sort of a very loving, supporting family, and I found something very early on that I was very passionate about in video games, right? And I felt a sense of purpose to that. Like I know a lot of people, even my friends and folks today, who sort of really don't kind of know what they're doing with their life, and they're sort of doing it, but they're sort of moving between careers or jobs. And like I was very lucky at a young age. Like I loved video games when I was a kid, and that's like what I've done for my entire life. Like I've never had a job, right? It's like this is my job, but it's like I've never had anything else. Like I never had to go work a restaurant or retail because I was always sort of figured out how to do something with video games. Although I did have a paper route when I was a kid. We'll talk about that in a minute. But so I think for me, happiness, it's just, I'm just lucky that I think I always look at things through the lens of I'm so grateful for whatever I have. And, even just like my health, things like that. Like that's enough for me in some ways of just sort of the way I view the world. And I'm lucky that I view it that way. And so, I don't know if I control happiness or happiness controls me to your question. I really think it's just something where I have been lucky enough to just always try and put things in perspective. And it's hard for me to even talk about it because I feel so lucky to sort of have the life and situation I've had that I know everyone doesn't have that. So it's like far be it from me to sort of pontificate on kind of, here's how to find happiness or here are the keys to happiness or whatnot. I just have been lucky that I've never really had a point in my life where I've felt like lost my purpose or been unsure of what I'm going to do. And I don't, it's not by design. I'm also like a person, I think people are sometimes surprised that I'm not really super goal driven, right? Where I sort of say like, hey, by this age, I want to have this in my life, or I want to do this, or, things just sort of naturally happen and come to me in sort of in circumstance. And I've just been lucky in that regard as well. And that I'm not, none of this stuff is planned out. Like even, the Game Awards wasn't really some master plan. It's just kind of like the way things worked out. So that's the other thing. Maybe that's helped my contentment, is that I don't have sort of these, lofty goals that I'm very disappointed when I don't hit them, right?
Yeah.
Because sometimes people sort of get to a point of like, I have to, this by this age, or I need to, accomplish this. And then you're disappointed when you don't hit that. And I just have never been that way. So maybe that's a little bit of the reason I feel more content, is that I don't have all these things that I sort of yearn for that were a goal that hasn't happened. But no, that's just my take on the world.
Do you think that goal-drivenness, the way that some people kind of jump from, one thing that they do that's really big to the next, do you feel like that might be the cause of what causes so much of this sort of contempt we almost feel for people? Because I can hear it in your voice. I can hear where you're like, should I really be talking about how lucky I am here? I can feel that trepidation in your voice. And I think it is kind of a little sad that we're at the point where we can't really learn from people who have what we're looking for because they're afraid that they're bragging and not just being like, listen, this is how it happened to me. Maybe it'll happen to you too.
Yeah, no, I'm just always conscious, like, as we were talking about earlier, you don't really know everyone's story.
Yeah.
And I can tell my story and explain it. But I will say, like, I've also had a life where I really love the work that I do. And like, you talk to anyone about me, it's like, oh, he works like crazy, right? Yep. And it's like, I do, because I really love what I do. And I'm just lucky that I found that sense of purpose. And I find, it's weird and twisted to some people, but it's like, I find a lot of happiness in like what I've been able to build and do, and contentment sort of from that. And, I think some people find that in life and some people don't. And some people, it's like, their family is really the root of all their happiness. And, and then some people, it's a blend of things. And it's like, everyone is sort of different in how they approach it. And yeah, I said, I think it's challenging to sit in a position I'm in and not, you want to be able to connect with people, but I also want to be very mindful of sort of the challenges that people have to go through. And some people, what the things that they're able to accomplish, born of the fire of a family that fell apart, or a disability, or things like that. Like, that's so much more impressive to me. So I'm humbled by that in a way of like, of course I should be happy because I've been so lucky with all the things that I have, and even for me, like my career and all the things, like it's never really been about trying to make money or to do anything like that. It's really just been about like what I believe I'm passionate about, and I wake up every morning pretty excited about the things I get to do. And even through, if I say, is there ever a point in my life where I was sort of not unhappy, but was kind of unsure? It was probably college years and kind of coming out of college. I went to USC for my undergraduate. And then after that, I think there was this point in time I was going to go to law school. I did my LSAT, so I was going to go to law school. That was sort of the natural path. I was like, probably going to go to postgraduate because I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do with my life. Mm-hmm. And then it became clear that actually this thing I was doing with video games, like a bunch of things happened within about 6 months where it sort of felt like, oh, there's like, actually maybe I can make this my career. And then I never went to law school. So it was kind of a point, it was a fork in the road about sort of deciding what I wanted to do. And I was, I guess, a little unsure about that. Like, I remember that first year after college, it was like, well, I didn't go on to do anything. It was actually right around 9/11. I remember I sort of had graduated in May of 2001, and then September was 9/11. And that was when I was I think I was still studying for my LSATs. And that was kind of I guess that was sort of a weird year for me in a way, because I was just a little unsure of what I was going to do. And could I turn all this, like this hobby and this passion I had for games into a full-time career? So that was sort of, a time when I was kind of, I guess, a little unsure, and then it just all worked itself out. But yeah, I've been very, very, very lucky. And some people, it is just their DNA to just, be naturally kind of okay with things. And, maybe there will come a point in my life where I'm not, right? And that's always, you always live a little bit in fear of that, right? Of that moment where, as you said, you don't have these goals, and then you reach that point where it's like, oh, that never happened for me. And I'm, disappointed in that, or it's like I've gone down the wrong path. So I don't know. I've been, I have amazing friends and family, and I've been very lucky to do what I get to do.
I had Ty Frank, one of the writers of The Expanse, sitting in your chair. Not your literal chair, don't worry, he didn't break into your house. But sitting in your virtual chair a couple of episodes ago, and it's interesting. Yeah. He has something very similar to your story in that he says, basically, he lucked into everything, and, but you listen to his story, and it's like he learned the software before anyone else, so he got a manager job, and that manager job turned into a COO job, and that COO job turned into meeting powerful people, and that powerful people thing turned into a book deal. And you can kind of see the road that was made in front of him by saying yes. Do you find that there are some opportunities, if you look back, do you think this happened because I said yes back here?
Oh, yeah. My whole career has sort of been this interesting snowball, one thing leading to the next. Like, I started beta testing for Sierra Online Adventure Games when I was a kid, just a volunteer, because I wrote them a letter and I said, hey, I'm interested. How do you make your games? And they said, well, here's a build of a game. You can go play it. And that snowballed into me then I was on CompuServe, and I was able to give hints and tips on these games to people in the forums because I knew the games. I had played through them. And then that led to an editor from a gaming magazine seeing my posts and saying, wow, this person seems to be a great writer. We should have them write reviews or previews for our gaming magazine. They had no idea I was 13 years old at the time. Pretty good at writing so
something on CompuServe. You got an overcoat, you got a mustache. Got it. No.
Exactly. But in my deep voice when they called, just like I think in Almost Famous.
That's right. Yeah.
It's me, Lester Banks calls him. So that led to then me writing for magazines. And then that led to me like getting to go to, visit id Software, right? When they were shipping Doom in 1993. And like, it's just so cool. I got to be around these people when they were making these games. And then that led to me like, writing for bigger and bigger magazines and like writing for Entertainment Weekly and Time Magazine when I was in college. And then that led to doing some video stuff, with Victor Lucas, who started this show called Electric Playground in Canada that I got to do on camera. And then that led to G4, and then that led to Spike, and then that led to the Game Awards. And it's been this sort of thing where there certainly have been people throughout my career that have bet on me and believed in sort of my potential. And that's another thing that I think is so important, is to find, I always think about that now of like, how can we pay it forward and support people? And there were editors and there were executives that very early on, for whatever reason, identified me as someone that they thought had potential. And I always was humbled by that. Even in college, one of my professors, Warren Bennis, the late Warren Bennis, passed away a while ago, was an amazing leadership expert. And he was one of the foremost kind of thinkers on leadership. He had a book called On Becoming a Leader. And he advised, for U.S. presidents, and he's a credible voice on leadership. And I took a lot of his classes, and I started assisting him with some of his work and some of his writings and whatnot. When he was he was old at the time. He was in his 80s, I think, when he was teaching. But I was very lucky to sort of work with him and learn from him about sort of people and empathy and leadership. And he was one of the early sort of supporters of me. And then there were a lot of editors over the years that believed in me, and executives at all these companies. So yeah, to your point, there absolutely have been opportunities, and I've really seized a lot of them. I tend to say yes to things. I've gotten better probably over the past even just 5 years of saying no to more things. And I was definitely someone that would always say yes to things. And I really, worked incredibly hard all through college even and stuff, right? My college experience was like, I did really well in college, but I basically like did my college work and then I just worked and did video game stuff. And like, it took a lot of fulfillment out of that. So, some people might say that, he's happy because he has very low expectations. Stoicism of just sort of like, I'm very happy to sort of sit and do things by myself. And as you said, you talking about the pandemic, going back to that, it was kind of a weird year, but I didn't mind it in some ways. I got to do a lot of cool stuff. Yeah. And, I often travel a lot now, or I did before the pandemic, and I didn't have to. And I was like, oh, that was kind of different for me. So, yeah. Can't remember what the question is.
That's okay. What we got out of that essentially is something that I think one of the core principles of this show was founded upon, which is letting people know that you don't have to be at the top right away. And it's something that I really have touched on, and I think you probably know a lot about, is people really think that the Game Awards, well, my career for that matter, like they come at you with comments like, wow, you just came out of nowhere and you're this mega success. It's like, well, no, actually I did a lot of things. And sometimes I think that's really a disservice to our younger people who are coming up now, because they think they have to be the executive founder of IGN to have any review out there. And that's not how it works. You actually have to climb up the ladder, and some people just get discouraged. How do you deal with that subject?
Yeah, no, I always say that one of the reasons I think I've been successful is that when I started young, I had very low expectations, in that I was a kid. So to make, $50 writing a video game review for a video game magazine was amazing, right? And it wasn't like I needed to have a full-time career, because it was sort of what I did on the side. And that, patience, I think, is just like so important in life. And I think a lot of people, especially in today's culture, are very impatient, right? Mm-hmm. You want to feel everything here and now, and it's hard, right? It's frustrating. You want things to happen. I think I've learned just in life and in love and in family, it's just patience is just like so important in things. And I was very patient because I could be, because I was a 16-year-old kid, and I, to make $2,000 a month, writing video game stuff was like amazing, right? And I got to do this from my bedroom, and that was enough for me because I was 16. If I was 35 and making $20,000 a year doing this, it's like it would have been like very difficult. But I was able to make it work because I was a kid living at home in Canada, and instead of having to work retail at the mall, I was able to do this video game review stuff. And yes, I think you're right. You have to sort of be very patient. And, for me, what I've been doing has been building over 30 years really now. And the Game Awards, a lot of people look at it and say, well, how did he do that? And like, how did he get, all these game companies to be a part of it? And it's like, because I've known all those people for decades, and we have a shorthand and we trust each other. And I've, built those relationships. It's been a lot of hard work, but I love all those people. And that's how it's been able to happen, is, as you said, that's sort of those building blocks. And I think sometimes you start something new, and, anything, right? You apply it to, a hobby or a job or a relationship. And it's like you start something and you just feel like everything has to be so perfect and it's got to work and it's got to move quickly. And I was able to be very slow in building my career. And in many ways, I've said, like, I sort of built my career alongside the industry as it built. And I was very lucky, again, to be at that point in time where things could be really slow. And, if I was starting now, I'd be the guy on Twitch with, like 2 subs, right? And just sort of like how, that's right. What all people look at. It's like, well, how do you go from 2 subscribers to 2 million? And like, what's that magic formula? And what are those steps? And sometimes it's frustrating for people to hear. It's like, well, that might take you 5 years, right? And eventually a lot of people give up, right? It's like, oh, I don't think I have it in me, or it's like, it's not working out. And I was just very lucky to be able to like slowly build that over the years. So now is like, the culmination of that. And I think a lot about like, what's next, or where do I go from this with that? But again, I'm very content doing the stuff I do. And even now, being patient about kind of like what the next thing is. And so people always say to me, it's like, oh, the Game Awards is so successful. It's like, what are the next 4 things you're going to do? And I'm like, actually, just like very happy doing what I'm doing now.
You already wrote 19 shows. Like, how many more shows do they want you to run?
Well, that's the thing, is like, it's not by design to do all these things. It's just sort of like, oh, E3 was falling apart. We need to create something new. And yeah, like some people look at me and say like, well, why aren't you doing, all these Netflix shows and all these other things? Why aren't you more like Ryan Murphy and have all these different shows across all these different platforms? And it's like, I don't know, because I kind of love what I do now, and I'm really happy doing it. If I get to do, Game Awards, I hope I just get to do that for the rest of my life. And if that's all I did every year, I'd be like, that's awesome. Like it's, I take so much fulfillment out of what I do. And it goes back to what you were saying about what are the building blocks. It's like, because I think I've built up over all these years, it's so meaningful to me in my work. It's like, I'm not building a company to sell it. It's like, I'm building it because it's what I think is right and what I'm really passionate about. And, when I look at like that trophy, what it means to me, and the fact that we have that, and it's hopefully going to stand the test of time. Like, I take great contentment out of like seeing that when I have a couple around my place here in LA. Whenever I see it, I'm like, wow, I feel such a sense of worth and sort of just seeing that. And that just like, that makes me so content to have that. But yes, back to your question, I think people do need to be mindful that it takes time for things to happen. And again, I feel weird talking about that because I've been able to be patient for 30 years building up to this. I know, and sometimes it's tough for people to like hear that and be like, oh my God, how patient do I really need to be, right? It's like with my life, it's like, can I wait, 20 years to get to where I want to be? Especially if, you're changing careers, right? Midlife. And that's what, most people, what's the stat? They have, I think it's like 5 or 6 careers in their life, right? And you move around, and that's not me. But for a lot of people, I know it's difficult because you might be, someone might be listening to this and might be mid-career and just changing what they're doing at 30 years old. And like my brother's example, someone that, went back to school and he's got his MBA, and it's like, that's what people normally do. And again, I'm kind of an edge case and different, but I kind of had to be different to do what I do. And I sort of, revel in that awkwardness and uniqueness because it's allowed me to build the things I've been able to build.
And I think that's something that we have to drag back out of that paragraph, is the E3 was collapsing and you saw that as an opportunity, but you wanted to stay true to who you are. And I think there's something real there about remembering that you can forge your own path in life, but despite it being true that, yes, you have definitely gone up to be very influential and famous in our industry, and people even outside video games industry at this point know who you are. There are lessons that I think all of us can take from that, in that you can watch your environment and you can see what you're poised to be able to jump on as far as an opportunity. Have there been, a lot of times where you've had those thoughts of, this is an opportunity right here, maybe not for me, but for someone?
Yeah, I just naturally see some of these opportunities. And I will say there's so many things that I look at and they're like, I have ideas for companies and things that have never launched, but I just like get excited about things. And I've never really talked about some of these, but I had a whole thing like 5 or 6 years ago. I built a whole music radio platform thing on top of Spotify that I was just excited about building, and I had programmers doing it. Never launched, never turned anything, but I was like, just got excited about this idea of doing this new thing with music. And yeah, I just see opportunities, and even now, like I just don't have enough time, honestly, to pursue them all, right? And it's like for me, it really is like, again, I'm not trying to be boastful, but it's just sort of like looking at these opportunities and saying, I'm in a position now that I'm lucky enough I can kind of pick which opportunities and what things I want to do. And there are lots of things that I see as opportunities. I'm like, oh, I would love to build this business, or I'd love to do this and do that. And it's just like so hard because my mind, I can't. One of my weaknesses, honestly, is that I am very hands-on, and like something like the Game Awards, like it takes up half my year. I always joke that someone tweeted this a few weeks ago that was like, like, what does Geoff Keighley do the rest of the year, right? It's like, the Game Awards in December, but like, where is he the rest of the 11 months of the year? And there's this sort of sense, I think, that like, I don't know, I just show up and host the Game Awards and then disappear. And it's like, no, like all day today, I'm having meetings about the Game Awards, which is not till December, but we're in July. And my weakness, as I was saying, is that it's very hard for me to delegate. That's one thing I'm bad at, is sort of like bringing other people in and like involving them and building things. Like I do a lot hands-on. I don't know why that is specifically, but I have a control thing where I really do want to sort of like own things and build things on my own terms. And that's one of my weaknesses, as I said, is that I spend so much time on certain projects like the Game Awards that it prevents me from sort of building and doing a lot of other things that I would normally want to do. And again, that's just like my warped, crazy mind, where it's like I just have ideas for opportunities and things that I see, which is like, oh, I think this should be built, or this should be done. And I'm lucky that I have the mentality that I just sort of see things and I'm just like, of course I should just go do this, and make this, and like, make it happen. And a lot of people, I have friends that like I always am trying to motivate them to just step outside of their comfort zone and do something new and take that risk and take that leap. Even when I was starting the Game Awards, I mean, most people thought it was kind of a bad idea, and they were just like, I'm not sure that's going to work. And like, it's not going to be on television. You're going to do this streaming online. And I always say to people, you don't know you're doing something unique until you do get that friction. And if everyone said like, oh, of course you should do that, then it's probably an idea that someone else has already done, or it's easy. And what you actually need is people to be like, I don't think that's going to work. That's a terrible idea. And if anything, that motivates me even more to just keep going, because it's like, oh, I think there's something here. And even with Summer Game Fest this year, I think a lot of people were like, wait, like E3 is a thing. How are you going to do this? It's like E3 is like that's what everyone does. And I was like, no, I believe there's a different way to do it. And I'm just going to go off and do it. And people supported me and backed me, and we built it, and it was awesome. And we were really proud of it. But for months, I mean, it was stressful for me for the first 6 months of this year, because people were like, I don't know if that's going to work. Is that going to happen? Is it going to be successful? And then it worked out. And I always say that to people. It's like, you're doing something right when people start to actually like challenge you and question you.
Absolutely. And I think that's a great launching point for something else you mentioned a little bit ago too, the networking and how important that is. You are obviously somebody who has, connections. I know, just like you do, that some of those people you've done videos with, you end up as friends. Some celebrities you actually know. Some of them are one-time contacts because they're doing a thing for you. And if you know the inside of the business, you know the way this works. Sometimes you make a friend, sometimes you make a network friend. It depends on who it is. So really, for those of us out there that are kind of learning to make friends and trying to balance the world of working all the time and making friends, do you have advice on how you sort of juggle all those things in the air at the same time and keep those friendships alive?
Yeah. Again, I've been lucky that I've grown up in the gaming industry, so I've met a lot of people that way. And I was always conscious of sort of building a network. And I remember when I was a kid, I would go to E3. I'd meet people. I'd send them a handwritten note after E3, like, it was a pleasure to meet you, and like, I'm looking forward to working with you. And another thing that I think was one of the secrets to how I sort of built my career was that I was very young when I was going to E3. I was like 15, 16 years old. So I had to be extra professional. That's sort of that idea of I needed to like upgrade what I was doing, because I was just this kid with a website. And I was like, it was a bit of imposter syndrome, right, of being somewhere. And I just felt I wore a suit every day to E3, and I was very professional. I had my business cards, and I'd write people letters, and just really sort of like try and build that network and be very professional. Even when I was just a kid with a website. So yeah, I think networking is incredibly important. I mean, it's a lot easier now, obviously, than it was, 20 years ago, trying to stay in contact with people. But yeah, again, I love the people in the gaming industry. That's why part of the reason I've never left is because I just think they're genuinely like really, really good people. And, being in LA and being around the YouTuber culture and the Hollywood culture and all this influencers and stuff, it's sort of like very different than the gaming world. And I'm so thankful to know all these people that make games, work on games. And it's just like, it's an awesome community of people. So it's been easy to network, where sometimes, you're in a company or situation where it's like you're networking, but you don't really like the people you have to network with, right? Or you have, a boss you don't like, or it's like, it's people are being weird or taking advantage of you. And that's just like never happened to me in the video game world, which I'm so lucky with. But yeah, I think networking is very important. And now, especially with Game Awards, I've kind of expanded a little bit more into like networking into the music world and into the larger entertainment world, right? Because you said we kind of work with some of those people around the show and stuff. And it's helped that gaming now is, something that everyone wants to get involved in somehow, right? So like all this talent is like, oh, we want to be a part of this show. We want to learn more about gaming. But yeah, I've been very conscious of like trying to stay in touch with people. I genuinely enjoy hanging out with people, going out to dinner. Now that we can in LA, it's like almost every night I'm having a dinner with someone new and catching up with people. So I generally I like people. So even though I'm like one of those people that, is a little bit of a loner, it's like I do love just catching up with people and talking to people and learning from people. And that sort of endless curiosity, I think, has helped me want to network and learn from people. But it helps that it's good people that you're networking with. And that's the secret to all of this, is that you want to like have people that inspire you and you can learn.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that gives networking a bad name, is everyone thinks that when you're talking about networking, you're talking about reaching out to someone who has access to people you don't, or a celebrity that has 1 million followers and whatnot. And sometimes people forget that the people that are rising up with you will be in important places one day too. And so do not look down on people, just help them up.
Oh yeah, I 1,000%. Even though I know all the people that run these gaming companies, like the people that actually, I work with on a day-to-day basis are people that are behind the scenes, some of the most talented, incredible people that I've, grown up with in the industry. And I think there are a lot of even amazing, like, women in the gaming industry that are like very behind the scenes and actually like, make things happen, and they're incredible and they don't want the limelight, but they're great friends. And as you said, they're people that, we started in this industry together. And you're right, you never know where someone's going to show up or what company they're going to jump to or whatever. And I always try and be like very professional with people. And I've just been lucky to kind of, as you said, rise up with other people across the industry. And it helps that there hasn't been a lot of churn of like new people coming in. It's like this, the same, like Tim Sweeney is a great example. It's like I met him, in 1995 or something, long before Fortnite or Epic was what it is today. And, I've maintained that relationship with the guys at Epic and things like that, or Valve, right? I met Gabe Newell in 1996 or 7 when he was just starting Valve. And we've kind of maintained that relationship for decades. Yeah, I agree with you. You never really know what people are going to grow.
No, you don't. And it's interesting to me always as well, because people will sometimes push back so hard against being kind. And it's the weirdest thing is you have the moral reason that you should be kind, because being kind is good. It's about not hurting other people. It's about helping out your fellow human. But there's also a very selfish side of it too, in that if you want people to do things for you, you be nice to them. And so it's kind of strange to me in these days that we are seeing trolls out there so heavily in so many different ways. What do you think it is that's out there that's fueling this culture that trolling is such a great thing?
Oh, wow. Well, there's a lot inside of that. I agree with you that it's disappointing to sort of see the trolling that happens online. I think it's, honestly, I hate to generalize, but I think it's a lot of people that are probably not particularly happy with sort of who they are, right? Sort of what they're doing in life that they need to take other people down to get sort of delight out of that. And it's tough. I mean, I look, especially on social media and things like that. Again, I've been generally pretty lucky compared to a lot of my friends that have had it a lot worse. But yeah, I think it's a different view of the world, and it's hard for me to kind of, be talked about earlier, like put yourself in the shoes of someone else to understand what motivates you for that and like sort of what do you get out of that. But I think it's, it's sort of to get a reaction in many ways, right? And it's like I see now, like when I tweet something out, it's like they're almost like auto replies from people like ratio this or that or whatever. And it's just like, it's people, it's like they're just like, you don't even have time to type that. I'm like, how do you get that out that quickly? And sorry, to troll people. And I just think it's, again, I think people are just looking for a reaction oftentimes. And, questions like, do you react to them or not? And I mean, I'm sure, you felt that in your life
once
too,
or twice.
Right? Yeah. And it's difficult. And again, like people will, troll me about stuff. And again, it's just nowhere near, I think, what other people have to go through. But it's just, I don't think it ever fully goes away when you can have anonymity, right? I mean, that's the biggest thing that I think drives a lot of this. I mean, most of the times and most of the trolling that I see is, with people that have like 3 followers on Twitter or things like that, right? And it's sort of a newer account. And someone, a couple weeks ago, I was talking to someone, an actor, was saying that for them, it's like there's a way on Twitter they can set Twitter so you only see tweets from accounts that are like older than a year or something like that, or have this many more followers, and you can do that. And he said, like, after he did this, it's like it just became so much more easy just to kind of like be on social media because it got rid of all these sort of spoof accounts that just get spun up to troll people and then disappear. And I was like, that's an interesting insight.
It's a good tip.
Something as simple as that.
Good tip. I like it. And I think you're somebody who can speak to this as well. I was talking to a friend not long ago about the weirdness that is having that following on social media. And everybody who watches this podcast, whether you're on YouTube or you're on Apple or whatnot, you're probably out there building your own social media platform. And so we like to talk about that here, particularly because, again, you have 1 million so followers. And as well as I do, after you hit about 30, 40,000 followers, people start following you because they hate you. And it's really weird. And it's something that I like to dive into on this podcast because everyone seems to deal with it differently. So how did you first react when you realized that people were following you, not because they are cheering you on, but because they're like, fall?
Oh yeah, there are people mention Doritos Pope or other things. And yeah, I've had like that over the years. It's, look, I'll give you a sort of the positive side of it. When I was a kid in college, it was sort of pre-social media. I used to write stories about making video games called Behind the Games on GameSpot. And I wrote a story about making Diablo 2 and Half-Life and a bunch of other games. And I would list my email address on the article. And every time when I'd publish one of those articles, it would be the most amazing feeling for like the week after, because I get all these like long, detailed emails from people around the world who were just like nothing but love. There was like no hate. It was just like, this is amazing what you're doing, and it's incredible. And I remember that was so motivating to me as a kid. And then you fast forward to, as you said, now in the world of social media, where it's just like once you hit a certain level or stature, it's like it gets bifurcated, right? There are people who are going to love you and there are people that are going to hate you. And I started experiencing it, pretty early on, like back when there was the controversy around like the Doritos Pope thing when I did this Halo promotion. It's probably a good decade ago now. They were just, and it's like the thing now, it's like people were trolling on the same stuff for like years and years. And I'm like, I don't think it's still funny anymore. It's like, this is like old material, right? And it's like, but people are just like pull stuff forward. And that was probably my first experience when I felt like people were kind of just there to attack you. And you just kind of mute it now. I think you have to develop like a thick skin over time to some of that. And again, it's been nothing for me compared to what, some of my female friends and others have had to sort of go through with that. So I'm lucky again in that way that it hasn't been nearly as bad as I've seen with other people. But yeah, I think you acknowledge it. And you just have to be aware of it and put it in context, right? And I always say, like, for every positive comment, those make up for like 50 negative ones. I think where it gets difficult is when everything feels negative, right? And that's why when you don't have sort of those positive ones, and I've always been lucky that I've been able to find those sort of diamonds in the rough of things that actually keep you motivated. And again, it's a little bit of that stoicism. It's like I focus on the things that are like positive, that I can control my energy towards those, and all the other ones you just have to I just learn to ignore. But it's much harder to ignore those if you don't have some positive ones as well. And I've been lucky to have sort of both.
It is. Our brains are really, really good at amplifying the negative and playing down the positive.
Yep. Exactly. No, and I've just, again, like my philosophy in life has always just been find those one or two positive things that you can sort of like look at. And again, it's a little bit of that stoic view of like things could be worse.
Absolutely.
Right? And it's like they could, but it's like there's that one positive comment. That's all you need to keep going. And I've just always motivated myself around that.
Do you have any comments or emails, social media, whatever's that you have, printed out or screen captured over the years because they were like awesome?
Yeah. I used to keep a file of the ones people would write me on my old articles, and now we set up a thing last year around Game Awards. We started doing these Zoom meetings with fans in the pandemic every week, and it was so awesome. I just put up a tweet one day that said, "Hey, write us an email about what the Game Awards means to you." We had thousands of people that sent essays about what the Game Awards meant to
Wow.
them. It would include photos of visiting the show, and it was so... I have a PDF of that. I sent it around to Phil Spencer and a bunch of other people in the industry. It was amazing. But yeah, it was like thousands of people wrote in with these deep, heartfelt appreciations of the show and what we did. I read that PDF sometimes when I want to get motivated about like the obligation I feel to deliver for this audience. And that's been the thing with, Game Awards. It's not just a show. I mean, it is a representation of the world's most powerful form of entertainment. And that's why I take it so seriously, because it really is, it's a spectacular opportunity. And yeah, that PDF is really motivating to read. So I do read it sometimes.
That is fantastic to hear. And as much as I love talking about all the positives, I do feel like one of the things you learn from in life more than the positives are the failures. And I definitely want to talk about that with you for a minute before we end up getting too close to the hour. What are some of the things along the way that have definitely been things that went wrong that you learned some great life lessons from?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I launched a website when I was a kid, GameSlice, which is still my email address. I launched it on CompuServe and the web in 1996, 1997 when I was a kid. And I mean, I guess I don't really ever see anything as a failure, right? It's sort of something to learn from. But I think I was a little myopic in my view of kind of like what I was going to be able to build as a single kid by myself in the bedroom. I was like, I'm going to build this amazing website and there's going to be millions of people coming to it and stuff like that. And it was a stepping stone to the other stuff that I did, right? So that's why I say it's not really a failure, but it was something that I looked at as like I was perhaps too ambitious in what I thought I was going to be able to accomplish and didn't kind of grow into what I thought it was going to be. But again, there wasn't anything bad about it. It just didn't sort of become the opportunity that I thought it was going to be. There have been other failed things over the years. Like we did a kind of this weekly YouTube show in 2016. It was called Live with YouTube Gaming, which was like this sort of supposed to be this weekly sort of talk show about video games that I was doing. And we did it for, I think, 8 weeks, and we thought maybe it was going to go on, and it just didn't really work. It was this idea that sort of like taking the old MTV kind of network TV model and doing something on YouTube, and it was this weekly show that we had guests on and things, and that didn't work. But I learned a lot, sort of, what the internet audience really wants. And I don't think they want necessarily always shows. They want to follow their favorite streamers on social media and things like that. So that was another one that sort of, I guess, again, didn't end up sort of quite the way we wanted it to be. And then I think of other like more personal sort of failures per se. I don't know, like it's really for me, everything I've learned from everything. And I don't ever look at anything as like I wasted a ton of time doing this, or it's like that was the wrong path and I wasted money or I wasted resources or life. I mean, even in relationships and things like that, I feel like you learn stuff out of them, right? Versus feeling like, oh, I failed at this or failed at that. So yeah, there are a couple projects that I look at as things that I was disappointed and didn't do better. And those are the ones that I think are the ones I sort of look back on and say, hey, I learned a lot from them, but boy, I'm glad I did them.
It almost feels like you have sort of developed this mental attitude of there's really not a failure as you define it by yourself, because there's something valuable that you got out of it.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, that's my view in life is, right? You're going to learn something about yourself. I think that's all of us. Like I would hope it, like as you go through life, it's like that's building this repertoire of, experiences and choices. It's just like when you're a kid, you hit the stove element and that's hot and you like don't do that anymore, right? That's a tough lesson to learn, but it's like that's sort of like the kind of thing here where I will say the one thing I worry about in just the world these days is it's so hard to even make mistakes anymore because I feel like with social media and everything being so digital and stuff like that, I think that's like so difficult right now for people to just kind of like grow up or live and learn and things like that. And I think we live in a culture now where it's like, people don't do anything because they're so worried of making a mistake, right? Or saying something wrong or whatever. So that's something that I think is disappointing in a way. But yeah, I've always viewed everything as like a lesson. And that's part of the reason, so that I stay motivated, right? And stay content. It's like, oh, that didn't work out. It's like, oh, well. And I've been like disappointed or angry about things, right? At certain times, even when I decided to bail on E3, like that was like emotional for me. And I felt like I had failed. My hope with E3 a couple of years ago when I was doing it is like, we're going to try and get the industry all together and keep building that and get, all the companies to participate. And then when it became clear that like we weren't going to get all the companies to participate, I really just took it on myself, say, I just have to get out of this. I'm not going to do this because it doesn't feel like it's going to come together. So that was sort of a failure to me personally, that I couldn't make that happen. And then it birthed Summer Game Fest and we got to do a new thing. But at the time, it was like very emotional for me. People even said to me at times, like, stop doing E3. People were like, this was like emotionally, this was like a breakup. And I was like, yeah, I was, because like I care so much about this stuff, which again is like weird. And some people would listen to this and be like, dude, it's just a job. It's just a video game. It's like, why do you care so much about it? And that's like, yeah, for me, like it really is like, it's like a kid to me, right? It's like I don't have any kids, and it's like this the stuff that the awards and E3, like that's very personal to me. And again, some people might say that's sad, that like that's what you see is what matters to you, but it really does matter to me. And that's why I think I'm so honored to get to do what I do, and why I work so hard is because I've been able to build on all this stuff and use the failures and the lessons in life to just inform how I continue to build.
So how do you manage to keep that drive going when you're not goal-oriented? How do you keep that fire lit?
Yeah, it's just intrinsic in a lot of ways. I mean, I try and inspire myself. I think the best thing sort of creative people can do is be inspired by other creative people. So I spend a lot of time trying to sort of motivate myself by things outside of the industry in a way too. Like, I mean, I still play a lot of video games, but I love, going to normally you're going to live theater or, going over to London and visiting places and traveling the world and seeing things. I think that sort of motivates me to just sort of think of the wider world in a lot of ways. And part of with Game Awards, even like what we're doing in India and in China and opening up gaming to more people around the world is like really motivating to me. But yeah, I've generally, there are days where you maybe get a little less motivated, and I'm just one of those people. It's like I go to sleep, I wake up the next morning, I'm like, I'm ready to go again, right? And that's sort of the kind of thing of like, I finish Game Awards, and it's like I need 4 or 5 days to recover, and then I'm like, yep, what's next? Like I'm ready. And that's just, again, a little bit of my drive that I'm so lucky to have. But yeah, I think I get motivated by other people, by creative people that inspire me with their work. That really gets me jazzed and excited to see other excellence. And then I just get motivated off work that we do and our team does and the stuff that we build. I'm really proud of the things we build. And that wasn't always the case. Like when I used to work at Spike on the Video Game Awards, it was like difficult because we were making a show that wasn't really all I wanted it to be and was a little bit too celebrity focused and didn't, but it wasn't right at the time. But this is another example of like patience paying off. It's like I learned so much about how to make award shows and television trial by fire by doing that. And I was just very patient that like eventually all going to work out. And I think sometimes people, even last year with Summer Game Fest, we started it, we did in the pandemic, and everyone's like, oh, it was too long. It was 4 months. What a disaster. Bring back E3. And then this year, we did it. We did this one big live show, and I was like, oh, that was great. How'd you figure that out? It's like, because we learned from last year, and we adapted and built on it, and Rome was not built in a day. And it's like, these things are not built in a day, and it just takes time to adapt. And I think that's one thing that I've learned as well, is that you stay motivated because you just have to know, like, there is light at the end of the tunnel. It's just, you might not be able to see it right now, but there's just that sense of hope and belief that, you're going to get there eventually. And again, I've been lucky enough to just eventually get there. And I know some people along the path sometimes turn back, right? And just feel like it's not there. And I've always just felt like, no, we're going to keep pushing because at the end of the day, we're going to get to build what we want to build. It's just going to take time.
Yeah, you got to be proud of what you're going to do. But you also need to realize that listening to that critical feedback is crucial. It's how you get to where you are. And I think a lot of us have had that same, where it's like, how did you learn to do that? Well, I listened to people. They said, this is boring, so just don't do that anymore. And it's, it's really encouraging to think about your path and think about how you don't have to stay on your path. You can always alter it a little bit, or you can come at the same idea just a slightly different way.
Yes, no, and I think it's great to get advice from other people and consider all the options. But at the end of the day, another thing that I've always been pretty good at is just focusing on what I feel like is right in my gut.
Yeah.
As I said before, sometimes everyone will tell you not to do something, and that's like, there's a spark of something there. Maybe I should do that. And so, yeah, I've been lucky to sort of trust myself. And I always say, like, you have to invest in yourself before anyone else, right? And this idea that, like, you are your own person, you can accomplish amazing, great things. You just have to try. And I have so many friends, I always, tell them, go build this business, go launch this thing, because when you get over that hump, it's going to be really difficult, but boy, is it rewarding. And I'm so thankful that I was able to do what I did. And again, everyone's at different points in life and different circumstances, and not everyone is going to be able to build a business or want to build a business or focus on that. But I just think there's so much opportunity out there right now for people. And you talked about opportunity before. It's like I see so many different businesses, and like I would love to do a podcast, right? I just don't have the time. But I'm like, I have so many ideas. I have this crazy concept for podcasts that one day I want to do, and it's sat in my hard drive for 3 or 4 years. And every year I'm like, I'll start working on it, and I just get distracted. And it's like I usually every year in January, finish Game Awards, go on vacation for a while, I come back. I always have like this list. I'm like, here are like 8 things I want to do this year. And maybe I'll get one of them actually done. But it's like, and they're big projects and ideas. And there's things I want to do and longer term projects. But I'm lucky that I have those things and they all motivate me. And I'm like, boy, there's just not enough hours in the day to do some of the things that I want to do.
You are not wrong about that. It's all about prioritizing and getting done what we can get done. Unfortunately, you do eventually have to go to your next meeting, and we are over our hour time. It's really...
Well, we're having so much fun talking. This has been amazing.
It's amazing how fast that time goes when you're just having a good conversation. But we're not done with you yet. We have the Inside the Actor Studio rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
Bernard
That's
Pivot,
correct.
Questioner.
Yep.
Yeah.
These are the Steve version of Bernard's.
Okay.
They're going to ramp from super silly and easy to very deep, and we're going to just let you answer. I'm not going to interject. It's going to be all you. Are you ready?
Okay.
You can answer as long as or as short as you like. What's your favorite color?
Blue.
What's your least favorite color?
Yellow.
What's the best thing you've ever tasted?
A Harry's Berry Gaviota Strawberry.
Okay. What is the worst thing you've ever tasted?
Wasps.
You ate wasps? What?
Yeah, bees. I was in Japan, and we had bees. They served us bees.
I'm very concerned for you right now. Have you ever loved?
Yes.
Have you ever hurt somebody?
Yes.
What can somebody do to earn your trust?
I think it's probably the best way to respond to that is by being themselves.
Okay. And what is the one thing someone can do to lose your trust?
Being dishonest.
If someone spoke to you the way you speak to yourself when no one else is around, would you be friends with that person?
When I use my inner voice?
Your inner voice.
I think so.
Yep. If you died tomorrow, what do you hope people would remember you for?
I think that right there. The Game Award.
Do you have a personal life philosophy that you would attribute to getting you where you are right now?
I do. I don't think I have it in a, aphorism of sort of like a phrase, but yeah, I do have a philosophy. Yeah.
Okay, that's gonna be a mystery question. All right.
Oh yeah, I don't. Yeah, I'm trying. Like, I don't have the snappy phrase, but yeah, I think it's so inner about sort of what that philosophy is. I don't know how to sort of unpack it. Right? It's almost like religious in a way. Of sort of like that's how I view things. But yes, I do have I have a philosophy or view on the world that I think is instructive in the decisions I make.
All right, part 2 for that one. Do you believe that some things are better left unsaid, Geoff?
Yes, absolutely.
Geoff Keighley, thank you so much for coming on to My Name Is, and we appreciate your time.
Thanks, Steve. This was tons of fun.